It's just a shame. And he should know better as a grown man in show business. People are acting like, he's just some homeless guy screaming things on the corner. This guy is at ABC. When's the last time ABC tolerated much, let alone this?
Right. I'm watching some of the liberal networks. I've never heard them care about the Constitution so much. Their First Amendment. This has nothing to do with the First Amendment. This has to do with the business decision, as you noted. And for all the concern about the First Amendment, they're apoplectic, Jesse. What about all the amendments that Charlie Kirk lost? Because Charlie Kirk has no amendments right now. None. And the outrage I see over Jimmy Kimmel, I wish I would have seen that for the death of a father and a husband who should still be here.
Yeah, they got their priorities all out of whack.
Did you hear that? Did you hear it? It's Kayleigh McEnany. And what she said was that, aside from the stupidity of Charlie lost his amendments, she is saying that because the action, the heinous and disgusting action of one person who decided to take violence, one person who, for reasons we still do not really know, decided to take a gun and shoot Charlie Kirk in a horrendous and disgusting act of terrorism, that person means we should all lose our rights. Because one person, a private citizen, by the way, Charlie Kirk, because that person was horribly murdered, that this allows them to crack down on the rights of every other American. And the kicker is, Kimmel just said that the MAGA folks have been trying to say it's not one of their folks that did it. Whatever. He didn't actually criticize Kirk. He actually put out a statement immediately saying the murder was outrageous and disgusting and condemning violence. I was sitting at lunch when the shooting occurred, before we even knew he was going to die. I put out a statement saying we all condemn political violence. Many of us are very upset. It's disgusting what's being seen. My own kids were shocked by the video. I can't imagine what Charlie Kirk's kids are going to see. It's horrifying. And we all have condemned it vocally and over and over, but it's not good enough. It's not good enough. You have to actually mourn a certain way to make them happy. You have to mourn properly. You have to mourn. Otherwise, you should lose your job. And see, that's what I wanted to talk about. This idea that this show is called On Democracy. Okay. Yeah, the idea that because of Charlie Kirk's murder, our democracy, the rights that we fought to gain, the 250th anniversary of our Declaration of Independence is next July. All that's moot if we use words they don't like about a private citizen. And where this is playing out, of course, as you guys know, most recently, loudly this week, has been the firing of Jimmy Kimmel. And essentially, he has been fired. We're hearing now that his show was suspended, but they literally kicked him out of a studio, apparently. So it's done. They fired a very popular TV show because he didn't mourn properly in their ways. And here's the spin. You heard what she said. This is a private business decision. I want to go there because when we talk about the First Amendment, let's be very clear. The First Amendment is designed to protect us from government suppression of our free speech. Government suppression of our free. Now, look, they know this. Why they keep saying that this was a private business decision. Let's talk about that private business decision. So in the ABC case, they have a public broadcast license. They are a public company. They are on the airways and on cable. So what's been happening is they're trying to say this was a business decision because certain members of the community that support ABC were upset by Jimmy Kimmel's heinous words, which I'm not going to get into that because let's just talk about the fallout. They're saying it was a private decision. Let's look what Brendan Carr, who's an author of Project 2025, by the way, is now this commissioner of the FCC chair. This is what he said on the Benny Johnson show. And I'm not going to watch the whole thing, but I wanted you to get a feel for what he and Benny Johnson, by the way, paid by the Russians, don't forget that. But he and Benny Johnson talked about on Benny Johnson's right-wing show.
When you look at the conduct that has taken place by Jimmy Kimmel, it appears to be some of the sickest conduct possible. As you've indicated, there are, avenues here for the FCC. So there are some ways in which I need to be a little bit careful because we could be called ultimately to be a judge on some of these claims that come up. But I don't think this is an isolated incident. I mean, you go back to Representative Swalwell, and he had a tweet out last week where he was saying that, emphasizing that Charlie Kirk's killer was a straight white male from a Republican family that voted for Donald Trump. In some quarters, there's a very concerted effort to try to lie to the American people about the nature, as you indicated, one of the most significant, newsworthy public interest acts.
Okay, let's stop there. Where's the lie? Where's the lie? The murder that they've arrested came from a good Mormon family in Utah, that it was straight Republican. His own grandmother said they were very conservative. They supported Trump. That's the guy they arrested. He is by all measures a straight white male, no matter how much they want to spin this. Where is the lie? That's the head of the FCC. What's fascinating about that shot is he's standing in his office. That's an official act by the chairman of the SEC, standing in front of his flag in his office. That's him in his role as chairman of the FCC, a government official, listing offenses. And what's funny about that video is you watch, you can see Kimmel's bit that they're so mad about. Nowhere in there does he say anything bad about Charlie Kirk. Nowhere in there does he accuse anyone. Nowhere in there does he lie. He's just saying the political situations, they're trying to spin it to blame anybody but their own possibly people. And that the president, and he even acknowledged the president clearly upset about this. They're literally lying to you about what he said to punish him. But here's what I thought was interesting. Let's watch this clip too. This is Brendan Carr, same guy, but on a different network.
You wonder, and I think many people do, whether you really are just targeting comedians who typically through the years have made fun of political figures in a way that because the president simply is offended by it.
No. Look, again, broadcast TV is different. We're on a cable show right now. You don't have an FCC license. You don't have an obligation to serve the public interest. Podcasts don't either. Stand-up comedians, whether they're on lots of forms of communications, don't. And Kimmel is free to do that. But if you have a broadcast TV license, that means that you have something that very few people have. And you're excluding other people from having access to that valuable public resource. And it comes with an obligation to serve the public interest. And again, over the years, there's been a rule in place at the FCC that local TV stations get to preempt programming that they don't think meets the needs of their communities. But recently, these national programmers, ABC, Disney, Comcast, NBC, they've been exercising outsized control and power over those local TV stations, and there's been no pushback. And this is a very significant moment because local broadcasters are now pushing back on national programmers for the first time that I can think of in modern history. And that's one thing we want at the FCC. We want to empower local broadcasters that have the public interest obligation to push back on national programmers so that people have more choice.
That kind of.
Now, this sounds all very generic and professional. Do you see the difference in the conversation between Benny Johnson and what is the CNBC? I mean, do you see the difference? Okay. Oh, all very professional, apolitical. Well, let's talk about those local broadcasts. Those local broadcasts are Sinclair and Nexstar, two very right-wing groups who are consolidating control of all these. The joke is these are just little mom and pop stations who are they just want to have power. They own 60 TV stations right now. If the Nexstar, if you've heard, we'll talk about it with our guest, the consolidation goes through basically two companies, two right-wing families are going to own the overwhelming, like 80% of all local TV stations across the country. These aren't just mom and pop, just trying to serve their community. It's a broadcast network in all but name. He wants to empower them. He's telling them what to do. And look, that's where the line gets crossed. When the government is directing folks how to behave and to punish for free speech. Look, the spin is simple. These are business decisions. These are private decisions. Government has nothing, but you and I have been watching the reality in the news, and we know what's happening. And why do we know what's happening? Because the president, Donald Trump, is too stupid to keep his mouth shut. This is Trump yesterday on Air Force One.
Yeah, go ahead. Anybody?
Mr. President, who would you like to see? Mr. President, are you going to ask Brendan Carr to weigh in on other late night hosts that you have said should be off the air?
Late night host is on network television. There is a license. I'll give you an example. I read someplace that the networks were 97% against me. I get 97% negative, and yet I won it easily. I won all 7 swing states, popular, I won everything. And if they're 97% against, they give me only bad publicity or press. I mean, they're getting a license. I would think maybe their license should be taken away. It will be up to Brendan Carr. I think Brendan Carr is outstanding. He's a patriot. He loves our country, and he's a tough guy. So we'll have to see.
Why is that not a free speech issue?
When you think about this, 97% of the stories are opposed to me, and yet I win easily the election. It's pretty amazing when you think of it. That shows they have no credibility. Go ahead.
I was just going to agree with you. I mean, could you use that same logic with news? If someone
Get it? Oh, these broadcast networks, they're 97. First of all, it's a made up number. Okay. Completely freaking made up. Okay. It's not a thing. Okay. They're just reporting stories, but he doesn't like them. And there's a key word. I almost stopped the video. It's bad publicity. They correct themselves. Bad press, bad news. Okay. Bad publicity. You see, Donald Trump has marketed one thing his entire life. Donald Trump. Look, I went to West Point in the 1980s. I knew about Donald Trump. Okay. He was publicity. Talk about publicity. Constant press. All press is good press in Donald Trump. But he really slipped up there on the plane saying, well, they've get, all the negative publicity. This is all about his ego, his popularity, and attacks on him. It has nothing to do with lying, has nothing to do with the public trust, but they're spinning this, spinning. Oh, no, it's not. Look, these companies are being pressured to do this. And I don't care how many steps it takes for the government to break free speech. I don't care if the government arrests somebody for their free speech or the government takes 5 steps by pressuring a company to do something, to do one thing and then do another. And it doesn't matter that Brendan Carr didn't necessarily say Jimmy Kimmel should be fired, but he told there should be consequences. He's pressuring a group that has a merger in front of his mission right now to take an act. That group acted, and then the parent company acted. I don't care if it's 2 steps or 5 steps. The government is suppressing free, protected speech. And that's everything we fought for. That's everything we start with. It's the First Amendment for a reason. But what happens next? And where do we go from here? And those are things I want to talk about. And I'll show this clip of Eric Swalwell yesterday. Obviously, his favorite target. Brendan Carr mentioned his outrageous tweet where he actually described the person they arrested. Here's Swalwell yesterday as well. And I want to leave this clip, this start with this.
I want to make it clear. There's going to be a Democratic majority in just over a year. And to the FCC chairperson and anyone involved in these dirty deals, get a lawyer and save your records, because you're going to be in this room and you're going to be answering questions about the deals that you struck and who benefited and what the cost was to the American people because that happened.
How do we fight back? We fight, we vote, we move forward. This pendulum will swing, and they think they're untouchable. They think they can't be touched. But I go back to history of people who thought they were untouchable and ended up not being untouchable. Right here in America, we had Joe McCarthy, for example, who's now in his grave. He died in his reputation in tatters because of what he did. So we're there. So I want to talk to a great guest, one of my favorite guests. Why is he a favorite guest? Because I have him on all the time, as you can tell. That's Greg Sargent, formerly of the Washington Post, now at the New Republic. We've got a lot to talk about, obviously, about these attacks on our rights and what does it mean and where do we go? So I'm really excited about this show on a Friday night. This is On Democracy with FP Wellman. I'm your host, Fred Wellman. I'm so excited to talk to you guys today. You know what? Let's get on with the show. Welcome. As I mentioned and knocked my mic as always, I am Fred Wellman, the host of On Democracy FP Wellman. We've got a great show. We got a great guest. We got a lot to talk about. So I'm really excited to move forward. I hope you guys are doing well. I appreciate you joining us here on a Friday night. There's a lot to do. So without any further ado, let me talk about our guest. I love our guest. Our guest is one of my first guests. Okay. Greg Sargent joined us when we were an audio only podcast, I think 3.5 years ago. Of course, he is Greg Sargent. He's a staff writer for the New Republic and the host of the podcast, The Daily Blast. He was with the Washington Post for many years. He's also author of the critically acclaimed book, An Uncivil War, Taking Back Our Democracy in an Age of Disinformation and Thunderdome Politics, which I think I interviewed you about that, Greg. Also, like I said, one of our favorite. I think you may have the record, Greg, as most guest appearances on Democracy. So I'll send you a coffee mug, or when we create.
My mom read a high out.
Yeah, I know. Look who we are. And of course, you got your own podcast now, Daily Blast. I know how you do it daily. We were talking about how much work it is. It's God bless you, brother. That's all I can say.
It's a lot of work.
It really is. The talk of the week, of course, and you've been writing it quite a bit. I think you just hit send on another post is the suspension and likely firing of Jimmy Kimmel at the behest of the president and the FCC chair. And I opened the show with Brendan Carr saying this had to do with the broadcast standards and how licenses are different, but really it's so much more than that, isn't it? This is a much larger issue than what he's trying to spin it as.
Yeah, in fact, I thought Brendan Carr had a really revealing interview on Sean Hannity on Fox News, which I encourage everybody to watch. He basically gave away the whole scam as clearly as you could want. He essentially said, look, during the 2024 election, the media was stacked against President Trump, and then he made up a bunch of bullshit about that the media was lying about Trump when in fact the media was telling the truth about him. But then Brendan Carr turned around and said, so in the public interest, these media organizations need to meet the public interest in order to qualify for their licenses. And so he said straight out that he equates the public interest, operating the public interest, with refraining from criticizing Trump. That is as corrupt as it gets, man.
I mean, it really does. And there's just no way around it. One of the things I said in the intro is they're trying to play a little game that these are business decisions, that it's not really government intervention. But one of the things I've been saying for a couple of days is I don't care if it's the government saying fire that guy or they take a 5-step process to get it done. He was pressuring local state. I mean, it feels that they're trying to do like a hide the ball game where, well, I didn't exactly say they fired, but I did say there'd be repercussions. I mean, it is hide the ball, isn't it?
I think it's a critical point. In fact, Hannity also played that same game that you just outlined, because what they're trying to do, in addition to hiding the ball on what their actual game is they're trying to point to removals like the Jimmy Kimmel one as proof that the culture is in some sense on Trump's side, right? Hannity went out there and he said something like, Jimmy Kimmel got pulled because his anti-Trump humor isn't funny and people don't give a shit about it and don't like it. But if that were actually the case, then they wouldn't need to use government coercion to force Kimmel out. And of course they used government coercion. He said he went on a right-wing, Brendan Carr went on a right-wing podcast right before all this happened and said straight out that, Disney and ABC had better do the right thing on Charlie Kirk. Remember, they were blaming Jimmy Kimmel for supposedly getting it wrong on the assassins. So they're being very clear about how this all works, even as they play hide the ball about it.
And it's more than First Amendment. You interviewed Ana Gomez. She's the sole Democrat on the FCC. So I also brought the fact it's flat out illegal. Like, I mean, obviously the First Amendment's a big one, but it's illegal what she's pulling by law too, isn't it?
Well, it's a little tough to say. The experts I spoke to said it may be that Brendan Carr is fudging his language just enough to avoid really openly skirting the law, but it's clearly unconstitutional. And Ana Gomez, as you say, the only Dem commissioner on the FCC, said she thought that it is a violation of the law. So, look, Carr is playing a really dangerous game here. He'll probably get away with it. I'd like to see Democrats come out and forcefully say, when we take back power, Carr, you better get yourself a lawyer. Eric Swalwell, the congressman from California,
yeah, I showed that clipping.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did, because this is what Democrats should be doing. They should be doing exactly that. They should be saying anyone who breaks the law or carries out Trump's corrupt or illegal orders can expect accountability later. They need to make that clear.
Yeah, and we need to plan for it, right? I mean, that's the other part of it. It's not going to happen in a vacuum. We're going to have a plan. There's a lot of, because but the Dems need to have a project 2028. It's like, no, I just need to have a plan, right? That we are going to do these things. Here's our agenda when we take power and stuff like that. It is also, you wrote in that same column, I think, about the not coincidental connection between the Nexstar merger and the attack on Kimmel. That one of the things I caught, one of the clips I was watching, is that they're saying how, Carr said, I think it was on CNBC, how, well, we want local stations to have the power for their community. Yeah. But like it's a mom and pop thing, like, oh, we're protecting Springfield, and it's not Springfield. The Nexstar and Sinclair own, like, between the two of them, are going to very well own most of the local stations in America, aren't they?
Well, just to your point about what they say about the local communities is actually critical, because Brendan Carr says something like, okay, now they're going to operate in these local stations are going to operate in the interests of their local communities. But again, what he means by in the interests of their local communities is refrain from criticizing Trump or refrain from saying things that Trump doesn't like. In that very same interview where Carr said that about these networks doing right by their local communities, he also said that the networks have to, do the right thing and go after Kimmel for supposedly getting it wrong on Charlie Kirk. So they're playing a game where they're pretending they're operating in the public interest while they simultaneously equate operating in the public interest with doing propaganda for Trump.
Yeah, Trump last night on Air Force One spoke. I showed the clip as well of him saying, "Oh yeah, they're 97% against me. I think there should be." He's flat out saying that they're criticizing. He actually called it negative publicity at one point and corrected himself, which is classic Trump. It's all about publicity. I mean, he's not even trying to hide the football, is he?
Right, that was the straightforward you would want. He also said it. He said it a couple different times. He basically said straight out. The way he tries to sort of cover his tracks is he says they're uniformly critical of me, the networks, and you can't do that. That's what he said. They can't do that. They can't be uniformly critical of me, or they can't do that because they're licensed in the public interest. In fact, they can do that. They can, because of the First Amendment, they can be as critical of Trump as they want, but even so, they're not actually uniformly critical of Trump. That's the real scam at the core of this. But bottom line is he's saying, criticize me and your license is at risk. That's it.
And one of the things that's bothered me is that everyone's focusing obviously on this incident, on the Jimmy Kimmel. It's very prominent. He's a very popular person. He's well known. But last week also we saw the AG saying she would prosecute people for criticizing Kirk. The various, I'm a veteran, as you know, 22 years in the Army. I watched Pete Hegseth and services. We had the military service secretaries and Hegseth actively punishing service members for things they said about Charlie Kirk, a private citizen, on social media. The Secretary of Transportation went online and encouraged airlines to fire pilots and employees for criticizing Charlie Kirk because, well, we can't trust them in an airplane if they're so callous about life. I mean, this is like a full-on government-led attack on anyone who speaks out. And there's no way. That's why I think with the focus on just Brendan Carving, we literally have a whole of government approach to attacking anyone who criticizes a private citizen at this point, are we?
Yeah, well, I think that whole of government approach, that's the right language to use. I think we should use that language more often. The critical point is that Trump is openly and explicitly saying he's going to use state power to go after the liberal left right now, including its organizations. Right after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, Donald Trump said very clearly, my administration will go after anybody who contributed to this outcome. And if you look at that language, it's intentional. It was drafted. My administration means the government will go after anyone who contributed to this killing. And of course, contributed to this killing can mean whatever Trump wants it to mean. He'll say that if somebody somewhere said something less than perfect about Charlie Kirk, then that contributed to the killing. That's the scam that is at the core of this, I think.
And it's scary. I mean, I've seen MAGA pushback. The talking point is that, well, this is they keep throwing back at me online, especially like, well, this is just like you weren't upset about the companies being ordered to suppress social media posts about COVID or the suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop. But I mean, putting aside the various factors of public emergency and by the lack of truth about all that, this is very different than that, right? I mean, even if you acknowledge maybe that happened, they did push back on COVID disinformation. They weren't threatening people's jobs or livelihood when they did it, were they?
No, and they weren't threatening their licenses. That's the critical point. And they weren't making the licenses contingent on saying the right things about the president. I mean, It's not even remotely comparable.
No, and it's not even, and it touches on certain things. Circuit back to kind of what you're saying too. I kind of want to try this because it layers right in, and it seems like it almost got overlooked, I think, in this hullabaloo, if you will. Look at me, I'm using old timey terms. I'm getting old. And then kids, I want the president also this declaration that Antifa is a domestic terrorist organization. I mean, first, of course, it's not really an organization at all, but for me, what is chilling is that having watched, you and I have been watching this MAGA movement professionally in a lot of ways for over a decade, both of us in different roles. But I know that anyone who's opposed them, and this, Greg, has been labeled Antifa. I mean, they even have spread the belief that January 6th was led by actual Antifa. It wasn't actually MAGA people. This feels like that people are kind of, I've seen a lot of jokes, frankly, on the left about how, oh, I'm Antifa. Let's get, they're kind of laughing about it. But for me, it feels like a way to punish any dissent under the guise of saying it was Antifa. Since they believe everybody's Antifa that is against them, in theory, they could punish you as being Antifa if you so much as organize a protest. I mean, am I crazy or am I?
No. Stephen Miller, the quote that I think is worth focusing on is the one where Stephen Miller said the Democratic Party is a terrorist organization, basically.
Jeez.
They've been calling their enemies or their political enemies terrorists for years. Donald Trump has been doing that for years. And so the key combination here is, on the one hand, they seem to be seeking some kind of power to designate groups, domestic terrorist organizations, which the president, as far as I can tell, lacks the authority to do. They're trying to figure out how they can do that. But they're doing that even as they label all Democrats terrorists. And so that's the alarming combination. Look, this is the thing. They're gonna go after the liberal left and its organizations in every conceivable way they can. I think that there's a little, or it remains to be seen how far they're actually going to get with this stuff. Not that makes it okay. It's an extremely chilling and dangerous moment, but it may be that they can't actually do anything close to what they really hope.
I hope not. I mean, this all does come after Trump went on Fox and all but declared open season on liberals on the left. You wrote about this in your piece, like on the 12th of the month. A lot of the focus on him. It's funny. I've run that clip. I got a lot of hell on Twitter, like I always do, because about him saying, "Well, I don't care if I get in trouble about this." But what came next was him saying the problem is left wing radicals, and as you pointed out, all but essentially called out for attacks on the liberals on the left, didn't he?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was just as clear as day. Sorry, we had a visitor.
No worries. I love guests.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. It was just like he went on Fox News and he absolutely declared open season. It was as clear as day. I think there's a bit of a danger in getting too spooked by it, though, because part of what they're doing, and I know I'm pretty sure you agree with me on this, part of what they're doing is trying to scare people, is trying to convince them that it's all over, that democracy's dead, that there's no point in political mobilization. And, we can't jump every time they say boo. We have to be aware that there's lots and lots of resources at our disposal to combat this stuff. And look, a lot of these groups are doing amazingly heroic work in the courts. The ACLU, for instance, which I guess they're going to go after, has been doing very well in stopping some of the immigration stuff. Abrego Garcia, the wrongfully deported man who was sent to the gulag in El Salvador, seems to be on track to genuinely contesting the effort to destroy him. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but he could win. I don't want to get too optimistic, but he could win at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so, we should take solace from the fact that they're so ripshit pissed at these groups that they're going after them precisely at the moment when those groups are actually, gaining some ground and pushing back the authoritarian onslaught.
Yeah, I agree. And there's more and more of it. I mean, just this morning, I watched the news while we were hanging out that he's looking to fire the top federal prosecutor for the Southern District of New York for failing to charge Letitia James. And this mad hunt they've got for fake mortgages because he got Bill Pull, look, I mean, and we already proved that his own people are doing the exact same thing. I mean, it's just this desperation to find anything to prosecute his enemies, and he's getting pissed because they can't, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually just put up a piece on that whole thing with the Trump threatening to fire the prosecutor. It's worth underscoring that is really, really corrupt on Trump's part.
Right.
He's essentially making it part of the job description that you have to be willing to bring corrupt prosecutions where the facts don't warrant it. That's literally what the position seems to be, because by all the reporting I've seen, the prosecutor who Trump is out to fire investigated the shit out of this whole thing.
Yeah.
And it was a 5-month investigation. And it's worth sort of going back and understanding how all these things come together. William Pulte, who's the head of the Federal Housing Finance Authority or agency, is a big Trump loyalist, and he's kind of rummaging through the mortgages of top Trump enemies like Senator Adam Schiff and Fed Governor Lisa Cook and Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, and looking for any excuse possible to refer that person to the Justice Department for prosecution. Now, tell me this, Fred, how likely do you think it is that if the FHFA were functioning ordinarily, that they'd magically end up looking at the mortgages of 3 of Trump's most prominent enemies?
Such a
People
coincidence.
in Houston Valley were doing this for years.
Total coincidence.
I mean, the whole thing's so ridiculous. It's really deep corrupt. And there's probably an argument that this U.S. attorney shouldn't have even investigated the degree that he did. And yet he obviously went really to town. Apparently they interviewed dozens of people, and there was one document per the ABC reporting that might have been slightly incriminating, but the U.S. attorney determined, according to ABC, that document is of very minimal importance, and every other document on Letitia James's mortgage files is accurate. So it's not like they're not trying to find something. They're just
didn't he show up outside her house in New York too, just one day, like a trench coat in August or some shit? It is the most devious. But they're not even good at it. I mean, I guess we can't laugh. I mean, I do like to have optimism. They're still the same Keystone Cop idiots they've been in the past.
Well, you put your finger on a core point there, which is that you're talking about Ed Martin.
That's it. It was Eagle Ed Martin. That's how I knew it.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Eagle Ed. The funny thing about this is okay, you can put on a trench coat and get a whole bunch of retweets and do a good internet meme, but you know what? That doesn't actually get you a prosecution, you moron.
Exactly.
Right.
It's comic and it's thing. There are competent evil people in there, I think, but by the same time, there's a lot of cell phones and there's a lot of mistakes they're making. I mean, he's been rejected by the courts multiple times, but again, it doesn't really save us. I guess a question on a lot of people's minds, even ours, is where does this end? Do you think? I mean, it's accelerating. We've seen an acceleration of their chaos and their attacks. I mean, where do you see we are?
So I think it's a little hard to say, but my sense is that we're going to sort of be in this really grinding trench warfare for years, that they're going to, look, there's no downplaying the seriousness of the Jimmy Kimmel thing. And Trump is extorting these major tribute payments from the news organizations. And to some degree, he's getting news organizations to capitulate to him here and there. But in the broader sweep of things, it's really not that much, right? When you really think about it. So, okay, they got the scalp of a comedian, right? Well done, Trump. Okay, but they can't control the kind of crush of reporting that they're facing day in and day out, and they're not really slowing that down. I think it's really telling that it was ABC News that's done this outstanding reporting on the corruption of this effort to go after Letitia James, the story we were just discussing. That's ABC. And so, okay, Trump extorted ABC for I forget the exact sum, $16 million in a settlement, maybe. And then he kind of strong-armed ABC into pushing out a comedian for a little while. That comedian may even come back. The comedian probably could sue, I would think. But
and has money to do it.
Well, that's for sure. And it didn't stop this reporting, right? That's the crux of the issue. That Trump cannot control information anywhere close to the way he'd like to. A lot of this is, mostly bullshit. I mean, I don't want to downplay the importance of it. It's super important. The point is that it isn't giving Trump what he actually wants.
Right. And so I guess that the final question, the most important, right? We touched on it a little bit earlier with what Eric Swalwell did very clearly, saying, hey, this pendulum is going to shift. What do you think Democrats should be doing now in this moment? And then as the midterms approach, and there's a lot of fear about the midterms. Was it Cleta Mitchell went on TV and said that Trump should declare a sovereignty emergency, a national sovereignty emergency, and then take over the elections? I mean, that's some crazy shit. Yeah, like what's your Democrats be doing right now?
I'll tell you, one of the things that worries me is that Trump is able to use the military in some sense to dissuade voting in some of the big cities during the midterms and some of the suburbs. I'm not exactly sure how far he can actually get with that. But if the midterms are much closer than we want, you could see some combination of them really corruptly gerrymandering numerous states somehow.
Man.
Right, the Democratic efforts to match that maybe going off the rails, combine that with these displays of military force that are designed to create a crisis atmosphere in blue strongholds or in swing strongholds. And look, if they end up holding on in the midterms through some combination of those things, we're going to really have to ask ourselves whether our democracy is pretty fucked, right? If that enables them to hold power in the House against what should be a victory for Democrats in the midterms.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. And it has to be, we have to fight this fight. We have to fight this battle. One of the things I see a lot that drives me crazy is people say, well, this X is a distraction. Just fill in the X. It's the ultimate algebra, right? This is a distraction, but I always joke, well, there's 215 Democrats in the House. There's what, 47, and we could do a lot of things, right? There's the candidates in the field. I mean, that we could all do different things and still fight this battle, can't we?
Of course, I've never understood the distraction line and this whole idea that everything always has to be about the kitchen table. Obviously, the economy is probably going to be the central issue in this midterm. The economy is a disaster under Trump. Tariffs are a disaster. He's very vulnerable. Every poll shows that he's deeply underwater on prices and on tariffs and on handling the economy, which once was one of his strengths. But surely there's room for Democrats to make that case while also calling out the abuses of power and while also making it very clear that, again, I think it's worth the Swalwell message is right. If everyone who is carrying out corrupt and illegal orders for Donald Trump should be aware that they can't hide behind obscurity later. They're going to face some kind of accountability. I think voters would see that as an expression of strength on the part of Democrats, not a distraction. They'd see a party that's focused and energized and trying to prevent really bad things from happening. And I think that would all play well.
Yeah, and I think they want to see fight. I mean, I constantly hear that as I wander my own area here outside of St. Louis, Missouri. That's where I live in the 2nd Congressional District, where Ann Wagner, our representative, doesn't show up much. People just want to see a fight. They want us to see it. We just had this huge redistricting fight here in Missouri that is likely going to go off the rails because it was so obviously illegally done. It violates the Missouri Constitution to have more than one.
Is it going to go off the rails?
Oh, yeah, it looks bad. I mean, first of all, the Missouri Constitution has been ruled on in the past that you're only supposed to have one redistricting after a census. It says after a census. Of course, they already did that 3 years ago. And the Missouri Supreme Court did rule on that in the 50s. So that's a problem. 2, they rushed it through. They actually put one small few hundred voter district in 2 different congressional districts when they wrote it out, because they write it out literally a 46-page document with. And they didn't look at it. They rushed it through that. They literally put it in 2 different districts. So that's a problem. Multiple lawsuits saying this was unconstitutional or illegal. We have the best one of them all is here in Missouri. For those who don't know, we do have we have a petition process where we can actually stop laws we don't like, and processes in 90 days. We have to raise 107,000 signatures across 6 different congressional districts.
Right.
And then it goes on the ballot. Well, they're well on their way. I mean, that the group doing that is already up with $850,000 in the bank. And so if that happens, the district is frozen. So, and now we're voting on it at that election. So I think in a lot of ways, they expended a lot of political capital for Donald Trump. And it's going to actually be an anchor around their neck as people, because people are angry. Republicans are angry about this.
Yeah, it's not really clear that the whole redistricting scheme works out in their favor in the end.
No, a lot of political capital for something that may not work. So that's our battle here. Well, Greg, I've got here on the screen about your daily blast. You're still on all the social media channels. Where can our followers and viewers and listeners find you, sir?
Well, I host the Daily Blast podcast at the New Republic, tnr.com or newrepublic.com. I'm on Twitter at Greg T. Sargent, and also on Blue Sky at Greg Sargent. So you can find me at any one of those places and check out the pod. It's every day, every weekday.
I know how you do it, brother. I have once a week, and I'm I appreciate you, man. So it's so good to see you again. I appreciate you being such a regular guest and coming on last minute. For those behind the scenes, look as Greg published his post yesterday, sent me a DM and said, you should come on the show and talk about it. And here we are. And so I appreciate you more you can measure. So thanks, Greg. Keep up the fight. Appreciate
Thanks for having me on, man. Thanks for
So,
saying
my pleasure, man. Good seeing you again. Cheers. Oh, man. It's so good to see my friend again. Greg is a great guest. As you can see, it's always a pleasure to have him on the show. Even with guests joining us, we're laughing about that. Look, I want to talk about something with the outro. I appreciate you guys being here on a Friday night, as always. And we're going to talk a little bit more, and I'll let you go. Let's talk a little bit about something. Somebody said to me something recently. I think I was at a dinner, and they said, hey, but Fred, even at this whole Antifa thing, and let's say they raid your house and arrest you, the court's going to throw that stuff out. That's true. I can't imagine a scenario where this nebulous idea that someone's considered an Antifa or an enemy of the state, whatever you want to call it, will result in them going to prison. But let me tell you how it works. I mean, they don't need to. Okay, that's the thing you have to understand. The reason this is so insidious is because people like me have gone through this. If you guys may remember, I was sued for $150 million by Mike Flynn over 3 tweets. And I won't get into them again. I'm allowed to, let me just put it this way. You're allowed to call someone a traitor on Twitter. It's literally been settled in law. Okay. But the point is, look, I don't believe in my heart that Mr. Flynn knew he was going to beat. I don't believe in my heart that Mr. Flynn thought he'd ever get certainly not get $150 million from me, because you all know my history. It's been published. Google me. You'll find out that I lost it all on 9/11 when I got mobilized in the army and my wife lost her job. I lost it all in the pandemic when my business failed and I was saddled with over $500,000 loans that I could no longer pay. Look, I'm not shy about that. It's the American story. We've had hard times. He was never going to get $150 million from me, ever. But that wasn't the point. The point was to silence me, to scare me, and to drain my bank accounts. That was the thing. Now, I got lucky. I was represented by a guy named Mark Zaid. I'm sure you've seen Mark a lot in the news, and Brad Moss. They're in the news a lot. They represented me pro bono as a pro-democracy defender. They stepped up. But we still had to raise money for our Florida attorney to fight in the courts in Florida, the federal courts. We still had to raise money for all of our documentation, our filing fees. We raised over $100,000, thanks to many of you, by the way. And I haven't thanked you enough. I got to thank you again. Mark Zaid did a GoFundMe. All of that money we raised went to the case with almost nothing left over. I got none of it. I never saw it. Okay. It went to the paying off our fees. And that was the point. I got lucky in that sense. But it took you guys a year and a half to resolve. A year and a half. I had a $150 million lawsuit hanging over my head. I constantly thinking, should I say this about Mike Flynn? Should I say this about others? That's their goal. And so the same thing here. Let's talk about the scenario. FBI raids your house. And let's see exactly like we've seen happen. Look at the Christy Nome, where she showed up at a house in, I believe it was Chicago, I want to say, or somewhere. Forgive me, my inaccuracy. I know you guys are used to it, but I hate it. But they had a raid on a house that was full of Latino men. They arrested 2 American citizens. Doesn't matter. They were picked up. Their house was ransacked. This is how it'll go. The FBI is going to say you're Antifa. They'll raid your house. They'll seize all of your electronics. They'll take your electronics, all the computers, because that's the evidence they got, right? So all your kid's computer, your kid's school computer, your wife's phone, okay, will be stolen. Your kid's iPad, your baby's iPad, because there could be evidence on that. They scoop all that up. They march you out in handcuffs. You know they're going to have Fox News there. They're going to do a press conference on the street. We've gotten the head of Antifa here in Missouri. This is it. Anybody doing business, we're going to look at everybody doing business with him, because clearly it's a network. So now your friends are freaking out and terrified. They're going through your emails. They're going through your bank accounts. You're hiring lawyers. You're desperately trying to fight this. You're in jail possibly with who knows what. Your reputation's in tattered. You have to take all your money and hire a lawyer to fight this. And of course it's thrown out eventually. How long has Kilmar Abrego Garcia been fighting? How long does it tell? There's people who remain in jail for months. If they're a threat, they can convince a local judge that you're a threat. So I know people want to take solace. Well, the courts will never buy it. Oh, come on. Yeah. But it doesn't matter, because your life gets ruined with just the accusation. And they know it. And they know it gets ruined with just the visuals. Because like we've been saying here on Democracy at the beginning, this administration films everything for a reason. He hired all the TV personalities for a reason, because they know that video works. the visual of these things sticks in your mind so that you remember it. You may not remember the details, but you remember that video. You remember that video of an innocent person being duck walked out of their, perp walked out of their own house. You remember that. So look, I'm not trying to scare us, but I want you to take these things seriously. They want us scared. So look, take reasonable precautions. I went to war 4 times. I led men in combat. You know what we did? We did a risk analysis. We looked at every mission. We were careful about what we were trained. We took reasonable precautions for our safety. And then we did our mission without fear, because that's what we have to do right now. Take reasonable precautions. Make sure you're not saying something stupid online that gets you in trouble. Make sure you're careful about your personal whereabouts. Make sure you're careful about your personal security. But don't for 1 minute stop fighting this. Don't for 1 second stop fighting for what's right in our democracy and our lives. They want us scared. I know this personally. It's a mission for them to scare me. And unfortunately, I suck at being scared. I flew those things in combat. I flew Scouts helicopters in combat. I've been shot at. In the end, it is what it is. They want us scared. But small men and small women are trying to scare us, who've never actually suffered in their lives and think they can intimidate us. So it's up to us, the democracy defenders, to not be scared. So, as always, step up in your neighborhood. Go out there and protest. Get out there and support a campaign. There's not a campaign on earth that doesn't need you. Not just your money. Money's important. Right now, we do have problems with donors. But we need your blood, sweat, and tears to knock doors, to postcard, to phone bank, to show up for candidates. Because if we win this election soundly, resoundingly, with no questions asked, they're going to have to answer to our United States Congress. I keep typing. I keep sending out, make Article 1 great again. Make Congress great again. I believe that. The Congress should be doing their job, and right now they're shirking their Article 1 duties. We need to fix that. So, thanks for joining me. It's been a great evening. Greg was a great guest as always. I appreciate you guys being here as always. As I've told you, we've got some cool stuff coming less than 2 weeks, somewhere around October 1st. We plan to announce some really exciting changes and new directions for all of us. So I hope you'll be around for that. In the meantime, as always, I am Fred Wellman. You can find me on all the social networks at FP Wellman or FP Wellman Official, depending on which one you're using. In the meantime, that's me. Follow Midas Touch, hit like, hit subscribe, share this with your friends. I really appreciate your support as we do this mission. And you can always find me on my Substack, fpwellman.substack.com, where I write and I said more about these, put the shows up, whatever you want to find there. Your support means the world to me. With that, I am Fred Wellman. This is On to Watch FP Wellman every Friday night right here in the Midas Touch Network. And I will see you guys next week.